September 27th, 2022 to order. Roll call, please. Gave a chair.
Guzikowski here.
Aldani here.
Seipert here.
Chandler here.
Okay. That'll get us to the approval of the minutes of September 13th, 2022. Everybody take a look. And when you're satisfied they're in order, we'll entertain a motion.
Seipert moves to approve the minutes of September 13th, 2022.
Guzikowski will second.
Roll call, beginning with Dawn.
Brillo, aye. Shinsky, aye.
Bukevich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Aldani, aye.
Seipert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay. That'll get us to significant common council actions. Carrie.
Council approved a resolution approving a certified survey map for the property at 150 West Forestdale Avenue. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 5 is Board of Housing and Zoning Appeal actions. Our next report will come out October 11th, 2022. And our quarterly Parks and Recreation Commission actions. Gary?
So the Parks and Recreation Commission met the beginning of the month, and they made a recommendation to the Common Council that the 2023 Parks capital projects is included in the 2023 budget as amended at that meeting. They had quite a bit of a discussion about park maintenance, some of the replacement schedules, what would be capital projects, and we were discussing that with members of DPW, including Director Matt Trebatowski, and kind of the and also with Jeff. So we were talking about what the needs are for the parks themselves and what some of the upcoming major items would be, and they were all very appreciative of that and recommended that council include the recommendations of DPW for those capital projects. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Carrie on Park and Recreation report? Okay, seeing none, we will get to item 7A, old business. Master sign plan review. Submitted for a multi-tenant industrial building on the property at 10303 South Oakview Parkway. Carrie?
Thank you. So this may look a little bit familiar. This is the master sign plan for the multi-tenant building on the property. It was held at the August 23rd meeting so that the applicant could discuss with the landowner some of the comments that were made and the concerns that were raised by both the Plan Commission and by residents across the street. Some of those, although they have nothing to do with the sign plan review, I will report with regard to the lighting, that those concerns are being addressed currently. Shades and shields for the lights on the loading dock did have to be fabricated and installed, so those things are actively being worked on. With regard to the master sign plan, there were a couple of updates. Within the text of the master sign program itself, there were a couple of items that staff had pointed out. They revised the temporary sign language, so now it complies completely with code. There were a couple of items that were from the previous zoning code. They also removed the end cap tenant signs completely. So now the proposal includes the raceway mounted channel letter signs for each of the tenant entries on the east. And that is in conformance with 10% or 30 square feet, whichever is the larger, and then one multi-tenant monument sign and one directional sign. And this is the site plan that we were reviewing before. Again, the wall signs are only going to be on the east elevation. Monument sign is at the entry off the east, and the directional sign is at the southern entry to the loading dock area. This is not actually an entirety of the elevation that will be covered by signs. It's just the location showing where signs could be placed, again, at each of the entries. This is a graphic for the monument sign. An update to this. Staff reviewed it and determined that it does actually comply with the code requirements. So the only thing that we need to ensure is that the proposed landscaping around this monument sign is installed properly per code and per plans. Directional sign has not changed from what the Plan Commission previously reviewed. With that information, there is a suggested motion on the screen for Plan Commission consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Does the applicant want to say anything before we go to commission, or just kind of wait on questions if you're present? Nothing? Okay. Dawn, you want to start us off?
I have no questions.
Ashley?
No questions.
Chris?
No questions either.
Don?
Same, no questions.
Fred?
No questions.
And Chauncey?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. I have none myself. Just want to thank the applicant for really taking into concerns those neighbors, although it was a little off agenda. Greatly appreciated the efforts made and working with staff as well. So, with that, a motion on 7A, please.
Guzikowski will make a motion that the Plan Commission approves master plan, sign plan submitted by Oakview Industrial Property by LLC for the multi-tenant industrial building located at 10303 South Oakview Parkway with the following conditions. One, that all previous conditions of the approved site plan review and all relevant code and conditional use permit requirements remain in effect. Two, that the landscape plans for the monument sign are submitted and approved by the Departments of Community Development. Three, that permits are issued for all signs prior to installation. Four, that all detailed, revised, and finalized plans are submitted in digital format to the Department of Community Development prior to submission of permit applications.
Goldani seconds.
Roll call beginning with Ashley.
Shinsky, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Goldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye. Furlow, aye.
Okay, thank you very much. That will get us to new business and item 8A. Review of conditions and restrictions for a request for the Bradford Real Estate Companies for a conditional use permit for private playground outdoor rec facility on the portion of the property at 150 West Forestdale Ave. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was recommended for approval at the last meeting on September 13th. This is for an outdoor recreation facility or private playground. That would be on Lot 1, the previous agenda item being on September 13th for a certified survey map. It is part of a proposed child development or daycare facility. This will be as part of that, which would be brought before the Plan Commission at a future date for site and building plan review. And just a reminder that daycare facilities do not require conditional use permits in the city. And the site plan that is on the screen right now is conceptual, just showing where that potential location of the outdoor playground could be. So turning to the conditions and restrictions, if you start at section 3 on page 2, this highlights the allowed uses, which would be limited to those in the B4 Highway Business District, the conditions and restrictions, and then all applicable sections of the municipal code. Hours of operation were based on what was submitted in the narrative for the entire daycare facility, which would be 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., although it's not anticipated that the playground would actually be utilized during all of those hours. Also restricting outdoor storage of any kind, so no vehicles, equipment, supplies, or other materials would be stored on the property. That does not include play equipment, just to be clear. Landscaping would be required per code on all sides of that outdoor facility to ensure proper screening. No pole signs, pennant flags, light pole flags, permanent banners, or flashing or blinking signs would be permitted as part of the conditional use permit, and all other signs would have to be complying with code, as well as the trash enclosure. All of these would be reviewed by the Plan Commission at a later date. Signs would only be before the Plan Commission should appeals be requested. Turning to section 4, just reminding everybody that there is no direct access to Forest Hill Avenue. That is the location of the existing and proposed stormwater management area. cross-access easements for properties in the CSM configuration currently existing on all sides, and then shared access to the two lots is part of that CSM as well. So that easement would have to be recorded with the CSM. Parking is something that was discussed at the last Plan Commission meeting and is something that the applicant would like further clarification on. Staff is recommending 46 stalls, and the reason that staff has recommended 46 stalls based on the information in the staff report was up to 23 employees could be on site at any given time, and based on the maximum drop-off and pickup times, it looked to be about 23 to 26 vehicles would be utilizing the property during those peak times. So I think it was drop-off peak was at 23, and then pickup peak was at 26 that they were anticipating based on other facilities. So the reason that staff added those two together is making sure that we have enough on site for anybody who could be on the property at any given time, whether that's people who are going to be parked there for the length of the day or even just short term. Since we do not have that overflow parking for the second lot, because that has not been proposed at this time, we have to limit this to what would be allowed and supported by what would be on lot 1. If the Plan Commission feels that 46 stalls is not what you want to recommend in the conditions and restrictions, that would be something that you would have to direct staff to change. We want to ensure that we have sufficient parking, but not too much parking, obviously. So that's just a point of discussion for the Plan Commission and the applicant. Under Section 5, lighting requirements are per code, and they will follow all of the requirements regarding shielding, cutoff fixtures, direction, Kelvins, any kind of garden or pathway lighting, and bollard or pedestrian scale lighting. Section 7 is the standard for the district regarding lot sizes and dimensional requirements. And although this says Section 6, it's actually Section 8, time of compliance. They would have 12 months to initiate the conditional use permit before it would expire. If there are any questions regarding the conditions and restrictions, be happy to try and answer them, although I believe the applicant wishes to have some clarification on the parking, but there is a suggested motion on the screen for Plan Commission consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Before we go to the council, applicant want to say anything? Wait for some questions. Come on up, sir. Name and address, please.
Certainly. Gary Wendt with Bradford Real Estate Companies, 106 Barrington Commons Court, Suite 726 in Barrington, Illinois. We have read the conditions and requirements, and as Carrie pointed out, just wanted to clarify the item of parking. We are proposing in our plan 41 parking spaces. We do, based on the operational information from the learning experience, and I may call them TLE, but they have, based on licensing, 23 staff. That's a given. Then their operation has drop-off parking, and there's a chart in what was submitted showing 30-minute periods for parking. Parents bringing a child, taking them in the secure entryway into the classroom, and then leaving. Their information indicates that in the morning that takes about 5 minutes. In the evening, when they pick up, about 8 minutes. And so we do, based on that chart, have 23 in a maximum period in the evening, 23 cars coming in a 30-minute period. So recognizing that they're there for that short period of time, doing the math, 23 divided by the 8 minutes would indicate there'd be about 4 parking spaces needed. It's all on average, but we're We have from 41 down from 23, we have 10 that are dedicated as short-term. So we do believe that we meet the code and are asking for that one clarification.
Is that it, sir?
That's it.
Okay.
I'm certainly here to respond to any questions.
Okay. Guess before we start, no, I guess we'll go right to the commission. Chauncey, you want to start us out?
I do have a question for Carrie. Can you provide more details on, or restate again, where the 46 came from versus the 41?
In staff's review of the materials, 23 employees would be on site at any given time. If there are 23 potential drop-offs, even in a 30-minute period, on average, where are those people going to park? And I understand that we are trying to reduce parking where it's unnecessary, but we also want to make sure that people are not going to be parking illegally, parking on grass, parking on what is essentially a private street with no parking at all. So staff erred on the side of caution and decided that 23 employees plus 23, even if they are short-term vehicles dropping off or picking up, would be 46 parking stalls. If the commission disagrees with that interpretation, you're certainly more than free to change that condition within the conditions and restrictions.
Thank you.
Still got the floor. Anything else, Chauncey?
That's it.
No. Brad?
I agree with our staff. I think 46 would be adequate. Number one, they could have other activities at the facility, and where do these people park if they come and visit that? So I'm with Carrie, parking on the grass and so forth. I think we should provide adequate parking for all the people.
Don?
My only question is, and I remember last 2 weeks ago, we had a little issue, and you might be bringing this up already about the layout of the building, which way it's facing.
Again, conceptual here.
Okay. And I figured that, I guess my question would be that would be brought up on the details that would be, that's part of the required, am I looking at the wrong one here? I guess that'd be more on the plans that would have to come after this, correct?
So anything with regard to the site specifics would be at site and building plan review.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. That's it.
Chris?
I would agree with staff on the 46 count for parking.
I'll ask Fire, is there any concerns over parking and with your interaction with businesses? Assistant Chief Havey, if you would.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Mike Havey with Fire. We concur with staff because fire department access on an emergency is really crucial for us, so that the space that's allowed for our vehicles to get in, we do see that the need to make sure that there's no extra congestion in those areas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I kind of went along the lines of my thinking. Snow removal, trash pickup. I think in this case, more is better on a conceptual plan. Figure it out. So I would support the 46 as well. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, motion.
Seifert moves that the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council adopts the conditions and restrictions as part of a conditional use permit for an outdoor recreational facility playground on the property, on a portion of the property at 150 West Forestdale Avenue.
Guzekowski will second.
Roll call. Beginning with me. Aye.
Guzekowski.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye. Grillo, aye. Finsky, aye.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next, we have a rezoned conditional use permit, consideration of, request by Ray Parker, Guggenheim Development Services LLC to rezone the property at 8355 South Howell Avenue from B4 Highway Business with a conditional use permit for a service station. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a resubmission or an amended application before the Plan Commission for something that was presented at the July 12th meeting. This is a request to rezone the property to B4 from B2, community business. The conditional use permit is for the same use. It's for a service station, which would be operated by Jiffy Lube. And there would be no changes to the wetland boundaries. The amendment is actually trying to get at what the concerns were raised by the commission and by the residents of the area at the July 12th meeting. So while the concept development plan looks to be relatively similar to what was reviewed then, these plans have gotten a little bit more review. In my request for WISDOT to review the traffic concerns, they were sent to Art Bauman, and the comments that were provided and included in your packets are from WISDOT, and they are official. So they are not requiring a traffic impact analysis. Their review of the crash history at this location showed that there were no incidents at this driveway, which is understanding that Howell Avenue has kind of a high traffic volume. It so happens that at this particular driveway, they don't have any recorded incidents. And based on that information, WISDOT does not have any concerns for the proposal itself. So from that perspective, staff does not have any traffic concerns with WISDOT's comments incorporated. The other concerns that were raised by staff had to do with the building itself, the design and the materials. We do have some updated elevations for Plan Commission to take a look at. This is not a site and building plan review. This is not architectural final design. But it does show that the applicant has heard the concerns and is updating those elevations to further comply with code requirements. We do have a few more concerns with regard to how the building is presenting itself to Howell Avenue, but those things can be addressed at site and building plan review. And lastly, lighting. There was a discussion, especially brought up by the residents across the street, for excessive lighting and concerns for light pollution. And in the information that was presented as part of this application consideration, the parking lot lights have been limited to an overall height of 18 feet above grade. That's to the top of the fixture. They also have, I can't recall the exact number of proposed light poles, but it's few. It's less than 6, if I recall correctly. And then the lighting for the building would be in the form of wall packs. All the lights would be directed downward, shielded on the residential side as well. There is also code requirements regarding kind of extinguishing a bit of the light for after hours purposes and limiting that to anything that would be needed specifically for security purposes. But at this point, those lighting concerns have been presented for conceptual review. So just a review of what the actual proposal entails. About a 3,100 gross square foot building with 4 service bays. They are not proposing any auto body or mechanical repair at this location. The only services that they would be providing would be fluid changes, tire maintenance, battery service, and similar items. We reviewed the employees. There are no changes to the number of employees that are anticipated for this site. With regard to oil deliveries, still anticipating 1 per week, and that is during business hours, so they are not anticipating any after-hours deliveries. And they are anticipating an average of 40 vehicles per day. Not per hour, but per day. Some of the items that would be included in the conditions and restrictions, should the conditional use permit be recommended for approval, would be with regard to the used oil filters, rags, and similar waste products being held in a separate container interior to the building rather than thrown in the dumpster. And that's for, making sure that we don't have cross-contamination and making sure that those items are properly disposed of. And the building would be required to be sprinklered. This does have shared access to an existing driveway, as was discussed during the previous review on July 12th. There is no change to that. There's no change to the location of where that driveway would be connecting. They do now show the stacking spaces for those bays. There are 2 stacking spaces per bay, and they do seem to meet the dimensional requirements per code for that stacking space. And they are outside of the drive aisles and the parking, so those requirements appear to be met. Minimum parking is calculated at 1 stall for every 300 gross square feet, plus 1 stall for every service bay, which would bring the grand total required to 14, and they are showing 14. And while we do recommend that the parking is no closer to Howell Avenue than the building, there is a portion that is going further east than the building in this concept, there is a setback of 15 feet, and that does appear to be met in this concept. As a review, these were the concept elevations that were presented to the Plan Commission in July. You'll see that it includes a mixture of brick and siding on all sides. And the concept elevations for consideration in terms of code compliance right now are basically an all brick building, brick and stone. And you will notice that some of the architectural features include some recesses and projections, a bit of a height differential in terms of parapets, and those are, and some pilasters or columns that have been added. Most of the dimensional changes are on the entry facades, and while we do have some changes to the east facade, we do believe that there are some additional requirements in terms of how this building, again, presents itself to Howell Avenue. But those concerns can be addressed at site and building plan review should the conditional use permit be recommended for approval and ultimately approved by the Common Council. We do want to remind the Plan Commission that an initial recommendation of approval for a conditional use permit does not include an endorsement of any specific plans. So of course, anything in terms of the site plan, the building plans, landscaping, lighting, signage, all of that would be for review and consideration at a later date, some before the Plan Commission, and of course, if signage requires appeals, it would also be before the Plan Commission. With that information, there is a suggested motion for Plan Commission consideration on the screen. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. We'll invite the applicant up if he'd like to say a few words, or wait. Like to come up? Name and address, please.
Dustin Salter with Excel Engineering, 100 Camelot Drive, Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. So obviously, being here earlier this summer with an unfavorable decision from the commissioners, we went back to our client Guggenheim, discussing what could be done here and whether or not they wanted to move forward with the site. They're still very interested in this particular site on Howell Ave and moving forward with the development. So then from there, just kind of discussing internally with the development team, we feel that we've addressed most of the concerns of the commissioners and the public with some of the data that we've provided here in the amended application. I think Carrie covered, the majority of those items pretty well. If you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot them over to me.
Okay. Before we go to the commission, I'll invite the residents up. Looks like we got Ann with us tonight. Come on up, Ann.
And
Name and address.
Ann Lampy, 8436 South Howell Avenue, Oak Creek. And I'm actually disappointed that this came back up because it's not amended. It's not amended. There isn't a change. It's the same use. It's the same property. It's the same business. which we did not want there. Art Bauman, or whatever his name is, does not live on Howell Avenue. We live on Howell Avenue, and we know what that traffic is. We also know that you have what was Master Lock, a beautiful building on the corner. You have the very nice professional building in the back of this property. You have a very nice looking restaurant next to it. And in between that, you want to put a Jiffy Lube. We all live with the zoning around us, and most residents in Oak Creek live with the same zoning around them that they live in because they live in neighborhoods. Those of us who don't live in neighborhoods are subjected to a variety of zoning. When we moved in, it was the Keeney property across the street, and it was a residential property. When they wanted to put the professional business in, we thought that that was okay. That didn't impact us. We could live with that, and we didn't object to that. When they wanted to put Master Lock in, we thought that was a good use of that property, and we didn't object to that. When DeCarlo's wanted to expand their building, we thought, great, that's good for the city, and we didn't object to that. If you are going to do a rezoning, there should be a compelling reason, because the people who live around that rezoning live with the implication of every new permitted use, every conditional use you're giving it. And you are taking it from a B2 to something with many more permitted uses. And there's no guarantee that Jiffy Lube will stay. Something else could move in with that same zoning, and now we're living with that. I think it's a disservice to the commission that this was brought back. You deliberate before you make decisions, and you decided this was not the use for this property because it was not the answer the property owner wanted. It comes back. That's a disservice to you, and it's disturbing to those of us who are impacted by this. So I ask that you say no. We said no, and we're going to say no again because there is a better use for that. And if you give it to Jiffy Lube, you can't get something else that fits better in there because you've given it away. So, okay?
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else? Seeing none, we'll go to the commission. Dawn, you want to start? Oh, yeah. No, you don't have to. That's fine. Okay. Who was that?
I'll start.
Okay, Don.
Yeah, all the things we listed, why, the concerns. Now, I didn't look at the minutes from that meeting, but I think one thing I said was I didn't want to see it rezoned from B2. And I don't see any reason why today I would say anything different. Between B1 and B2, there is a long list of things that can go in there. And if someone hasn't stepped up yet, well, I'm sorry about that, but Oak Creek isn't hurting with new businesses these days. Something will go in there. And it should complement the Children's Hospital. It should complement hopefully a different restaurant, or if DeCarlo's would come back, I'd love that. But yeah, it should complement what's around it. And it doesn't make sense to me, I guess, in a way. It doesn't. No, I'm not willing to vote yes on rezoning something for a oil change place. Keep it B2, and let somebody, we said it before though, something from B1 or B2 could go in there that, the residents might not be happy with, but at least that's what it's zoned for. I'm not willing to go out of my way to vote for a rezoning for an oil change facility. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. How about Ashley?
Nothing from engineering.
Okay. Brett?
I agree with Don. I think we want to try to maintain consistency along Howell Avenue, and I just don't think this will help the situation.
Okay, thank you. Jossie?
I do have a question for the applicant. I just want to have a better understanding of what's new or different based on the prior feedback.
So I guess from a site layout standpoint and the user, there is no difference from the previous application other than working to address some of the concerns with the building elevations and the architecture. Essentially what we're trying to do here is address all the concerns that came up last time. I mean, traffic was one of the main talking points last time. which I think we've shown is a very minimal point here. I mean, from a operational standpoint, they're going to be servicing about 3 cars an hour, 3 to 4 cars an hour. So from that standpoint, from a traffic standpoint, there's really no issues there with the actual site and traffic concerns. Just trying to reiterate concerns of lighting. Really, all of the fixtures on the site will be, down shielded fixtures and in compliance with city code. I guess what we're trying to do is just kind of point out some of the concerns that were brought up last time and just kind of address some of those and move forward from there. Obviously, we're willing to work with staff on any other recommendations. So, yeah, just trying to clarify some of the main points that were brought up last time is the reason for the amended application.
Thank you.
Yep.
Got Fred. Chris?
I would be not in support of this rezone.
Come back to you, Dawn. Comment if you don't.
I don't think that it's the proper place as well. I don't know, where the proper place would be. So, yeah.
Guess I'll just put my 2 cents in. We went over this, and no disrespect to the neighbors or anybody else, but, the traffic on there, they kind of had their little narrative here. I agree with them. It was going to be a private drive. It wasn't going to be hugely impactful there. The light, I have a lot of faith in our current codes, as well as corrective measures that can be taken to do it. Guess, I'll go with Commissioner O'Donnell. He just made a good point. We're going to rezone. Could be a higher, better use, possibly. So, guess I'll just leave it at that. Any other further discussions? Okay, seeing none. Motion then, please, on 8B.
Guzikowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the property at 8355 South Howell Avenue be rezoned to B2 Community Business to B4 Highway Business with the conditional use permit for a service station after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions that will be prepared for the Plan Commission review at the next meeting.
Oldani seconds.
Roll call. No, actually, it's in the affirmative,
Yeah,
correct?
the motion is made in the affirmative, and any votes would be cast either for or against.
Right.
We're going to start with you, Chris.
Guzikowski, no.
Oldani, no.
Seifert, no.
Jambler, no.
Perlo, no. Pinsky, no.
Avich, no. Okay, we'll move on. Item 8C, it's a certified survey map for the Byron Building Corporation, dividing and reconfiguring properties at 7300 South 13th Street and 7433 South 10th Street.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These two properties are currently zoned B4, I'm sorry, that's B3, that's a typo, and M1 CUP. The larger of the properties at 7433 South 10th Street is actually the current site of Go Right Way. And the proposal is to mainly divide that property into 2 lots, one for Go Right Way and one for a future development lot. The portion of the property at 7300 South 13th Street, which is to the north, would be part of that proposed development lot, Lot 2. Lot 3 is currently developed with Corporate Square, which is I believe it's 3 or 4 buildings that are professional offices over there. And this CSM is directly related to the next 2 agenda items, so just keep that in mind as these kind of will be slightly melded together, if you will. On the screen right now is the proposed certified survey map. Now, while the lots do seem to meet the minimum lot size and width requirements, want to draw your attention to the lot configurations. As we've mentioned in the staff report, these are slightly irregular lots. So lot 3, which is currently just a square, if you will, the new configuration would carve out approximately 0.48 acres to be combined with lot 2, and that's a part of it is actually wetland. It's not the entirety of the wetland in that area, but it is just a portion of the wetland. So the final configuration of that lot would be in the orange outline here on the screen. Lot number 2, which is the proposed development lot, of course, would then absorb that portion of the wetland property to be combined with the overall lot, and would also have a carve out on that southeast corner for that portion to be remaining with lot 1 for go right way. So the green outline would be the final configuration of the proposed lot 2. And then lot 1, which would retain go right way, again would keep that southeast portion with their current configuration. So the consideration that was pointed out in the staff report is with regard to section 14.122 sub A2 of the municipal code, which states that the Plan Commission and Common Council may deny approval of a certified survey map if it contains a lot or lots of an odd size, shape, or orientation design to defeat or avoid specific provisions of this land division and platting code or the spirit and policy of the land division and platting code. So the reason that we brought up this particular code section is because the main reason for the irregular lot configurations is for each of the lots to maintain a minimum 30% green and open space per code. We also want to point out that the hatched area on the southeastern portion of the proposed lot 2 to remain with lot 1, which is approximately 15,500 square feet, includes part of the stormwater, but not all of the stormwater that would benefit lot 2. So there would be a requirement, because that stormwater infrastructure crosses property lines, for access easements and maintenance agreements for the proposed stormwater infrastructure. We also want to point out, as we did in the staff report, that section 170508 sub B states this required green space, which is a minimum of 30% of the overall lot, shall be designed as an integral part of the site and may not include those areas for parking, loading, or other impervious surfaces. And the reason that we've called this portion out is because, again, the main requirement is for the retention of open and green space, but the open and green space is in this area completely comprised by stormwater infrastructure. And for the proposed lot 2, the area that would be acquired from lot 3 is a delineated wetland. And those wetlands actually cross the property line now. So while this is not a site and building plan review, and staff is not proposing to make any qualms about that particular concept that we've received, the proposed development on this proposed lot 2 would necessarily require DNR permits for some presented fills. Because otherwise and actually with whatever remains, there is still a setback requirement in code for wetlands. So those are some considerations that the Plan Commission would have to make in order to determine whether or not the configurations of the proposed lots are in compliance with code, or if section 14.122A2 and section 17.0508B are not being adhered to with this proposal. If this is approved, any development on any of these lots would have to be in compliance with the code requirements at the time of development. So if there are any code changes between now and whenever that comes up for development, anything that is required by code would be applied. And that's just a clarification. So with those considerations in mind, there has been a motion that has been presented for Plan Commission consideration in two parts, should the Plan Commission wish to recommend this for approval. Mr. Mayor.
Correct motion, Carrie. Up on the screen. That's on Forestdale.
You are correct. That isn't the wrong motion. My apologies. I will correct that now. Bye. If the Plan Commission wishes to continue discussion while I fix this, that's fine.
Okay. As usual, I'll invite the applicant up if they'd like to come, or you can wait on questions. Name and address, please.
Caitlin LaJoy. The address is 3885 North Brookfield Road, Brookfield, Wisconsin, 53045. As Carrie presented, this is part of a larger site development, and this is the first piece that we are looking for feedback and seeking recommendation for approval on. It does partake the CSM, rezone, and conditional use amendment. As far as addressing the concerns over the adjusted lot lines, we've really worked closely with another developer, figured out a site plan that works, and although the irregular lot lines may not be common, this is still a use that is approved by the code and the zone, and the wetlands are not developable. And so although we're purchasing those from the neighbor to the north, it does not impact either negatively.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll start out my right. How about Chauncey, you want to start us?
Sure. No questions, thank you.
Okay, Fred?
Yeah, I have no questions at this time.
Okay, Don?
Yep, no questions from me either.
Chris?
As same, no question.
Ashley?
Questions?
Don? Okay. Little yes, sir, come on up, please. Sorry about that.
My name is Daniel Daly, 7463 South 13th Street, Oak Creek. I have a concern of having it rezoned because I can't even get out of my yard now with everything that goes on 13th. They just rebuilt the whole road, took a good portion of my yard, which I couldn't stop them. They're gonna have to do it again. They're not gonna be able to handle the traffic of a business being in there. So if you rezone it for business and they can put these businesses in, it's only gonna get worse. They're talking about Howell Avenue having a lot of traffic. Well, you ought to live on 13th Street right now, between the church, the movie theater, the bus company. You can't even get in and out of your yards as it is. So putting another business in there isn't gonna help anything.
Understood. You do realize that I believe that's zoned M1 right now,
That's correct. This is for a certified survey map to divide the property. The portion that will be in a subsequent review is the portion that would be acquired from the proposed Lot 3. That is currently zoned B3. That would just become part of the rest of the lot, which is currently zoned M1.
Not technically rezoning the whole property because the property's set up to be that way as an extension of the 10th Avenue Business Park.
Well, I'm just viewing my
I
concerns about
understand
13th
this.
Street and what it's gonna do to it.
I understand, Mr. Daly. You know, and I mean, as they come through, and Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, right now it's just this CSM, the Certified Survey Map, but once the business goes in, depending on what's going in and what the building that's proposed, then possibly a traffic analysis. That, much like we talked about for Jim.
Correct. With this being a county highway, they will be expected to talk with Milwaukee County and get their input on the proposed system.
Okay, thank you.
All right, help me out. Where was I? You guys had no questions. I had the floor. Okay. Yeah, a little irregular on the lot lines. For the most part, though, I think it's workable. Staff can work through this on them, so you guys didn't have questions. I think Carrie explained it well. I think we should be okay, but as Carrie said, this is part of a bigger picture. We want to be conscious of what's going on there, but we have no objections from the neighbors. So that's all I really got. Any other discussion? Okay. Motion on 8C.
Donnie moves that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Caitlin and Joy, Briome Building Corporation for the properties at 7300 South 13th Street and 7433 South 10th Street be approved with the following conditions. 1, that an easement and stormwater management agreement between lots 1 and 2 are created and recorded for the access, use, and maintenance of the proposed stormwater pond. 2, that all technical corrections, including but not limited to spelling errors, minor coordinate geometry corrections, and corrections required for compliance with the municipal code and Wisconsin statutes are made prior to recording.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call. Beginning with Don.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye. Grillo, aye.
Shinsky, aye.
David, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Okay. That will get us to 8D. Again, it's conditional use permit submitted by Caitlin LaJoy, Byron Building Corporations for an amended to the existing conditional use permit to remove a portion of the property, Lot 2, of a proposed certified survey map at 7433 South. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is just asking for the Lot 2 that was just approved in the previous CSM to be removed from the existing conditional use permit that governs Go Right Way that was issued and approved by the Common Council in 2015. There are no other changes that are proposed for the conditional use permit, so there is a suggested motion for consideration on the screen, and I believe that this is the actual correct one.
Okay. We have heard from the applicant. Unless you have anything else, I think Carrie kind of covered it. Dawn?
Anything for me?
Ashley? Chris? Don?
Nothing.
Fred?
No questions.
Jossie?
I do have a question for the applicant. And also, Carrie, if you could share your screen.
My apologies.
Thank you.
There's really no graphics for this one other than the location map, though.
Okay. So my question for the applicant, so presently, the CUP includes lots 1, 2, and 3, correct?
Just lots 1 and 2, which is the current Go Right Way boundaries,
Okay.
which is the land seller that we're purchasing the future Lot 2 from.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So the CUP only covers 1 and 2,
Correct.
and the request is to remove 2 from this.
Correct.
Can you
Yes.
provide a little more information on why removing 2?
Sure. So the CUP is very specific to Go Right Way's use, and the proposed use that we have for Lot 2 would not meet or need that conditional use. And so it's just to kind of make it a cleaner rezone and not encumber Lot 2. You're
Okay, thank you.
welcome.
Okay. I have no questions going forward on that. I think it's clear. So motion on 8D.
Seifert moves that the review of a conditional use permit amendment request to exclude a portion of the.
Commissioner Siebert, there is a suggested motion on the
Oh.
screen.
Okay, I'm reading the one, yeah. That Seifert moves that the planning commission recommends that the common council approves the conditional use permit amendment removing a portion of the property at 7433 South 10th Street after a public hearing.
Guzekowski, a second.
Roll call, beginning with Fred. Roll call, Fred.
Oh, I'm sorry, Seifert,
Chandler, aye.
Grillo, aye.
you guys were fast.
Shinsky, aye.
Bukevich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Oldani, aye.
Okay, and that'll get us to 8E, which is a rezone to review the request by Caitlin LaJoy, Byron Building Corporation, to rezone the property portion of a property at 7300 South 13th from N1 Manufacturing. I read that right?
I think you're fine.
Anyways, go ahead, Carrie.
So the portion that we're talking about, again, is that roughly 0.48 acres that would be essentially wetlands acquired from the current property, 7300, and then incorporated into the Lot 2 for that CSM. But because that portion is zoned B3 to be compliant with the existing corporate square, having a split zone on the property, although the wetlands can't be developed, makes no sense from a zoning standpoint, because then you have conflicting district standards. So what the request is to rezone that portion of the property to be acquired as part of Lot 2 into M1, so that you have one zoning district covering the entire property. And that is the entirety of the rezone request. The future use of Lot 2 would be manufacturing. It's currently M1. And if you're confused about what we're talking about, Lot 2 is kind of in the red box on the left, and the exact portion to be rezoned to M1 is in the red kind of trapezoidal area on the right. And there is a suggested motion for consideration.
Thank you, Carrie. Again, the applicant's been up. These three were kind of interconnected. If you do have any questions, I'm sure she'd be happy to come back up. But start off, Jossie.
Another quick question for Carrie. I want to make sure I understood. So the majority of the property is already M1, everything except the red part, right? That's B3.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Fred,
No questions.
Don,
No questions.
Chris,
No questions.
Ashley?
Questions?
Nothing for me, so we can move on with a motion then on,
Guzekowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that a portion of the property at 7300 South 13th Street be rezoned to B3, from B3, business and professional business, to M1 manufacturing after a public hearing.
Seifert seconds.
roll call beginning with Jossie.
Chandler, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Jinsky, aye.
David Chai?
Guzekowski, aye.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go to 8F, would anybody like to take a short break, get a glass of water, use the restroom? Okay. No,
I will
just
make it
thought
as
we'd take
painless
advantage
as
of it now.
possible.
If you want to go, we'll just take a short recess for a minute or two.
Okay. I'm going to Irv's.
Are we back on, Kevin? All right. Okay, we will get going on item 8F, and it is zoning text amendment. We're going to review proposed amendments to Article 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 10, and the zoning and sign code, and then including a whole lot of bullet points. So, Carrie?
I promise it's not as daunting as it looks. So everything that's in Article 3 for the most part is just potential uses that we're asking the Plan Commission to consider adding to the use tables for either conditional or permitted. But I'm going to go through this so that everybody is aware of exactly what we're proposing. First and foremost, in Article 3, if you go to, the only changes that we're actually presenting are for non-residential district. So what we want to do is under residential uses, dwelling, single-family detached, add the code section under additional regulation 17.0403E. That's not actually changing anything. That's just providing more guidance to somebody who's looking at the use table, where else to go in the code. Again, not a change, it's just kind of giving people a little bit of help. Under recreational uses, we are requesting the Plan Commission to consider adding a category for a family entertainment center, indoor commercial amusement, and fun center as a conditional use in the B6 district. We currently don't have anything for large recreation and indoor facilities of this kind. We do want to make sure that we are allowing for something like this that is not necessarily the same as a health, athletic, or recreation facility indoor. That's more of like a health club or a gym or, you know, kind of like the Milwaukee Yard, if you will. Those kinds of indoor recreation facilities are a little bit different from a family entertainment center or a fun center. These are the types of facilities that would potentially have bowling alleys, shuffleboard, arcade, rock climbing, your laser tag, indoor kind of, I don't know exactly what you want to call it, not airsoft, but like Nerf gun type obstacle courses, mini golf, those kinds of family type activities all under one roof. May include food provision, but that doesn't necessarily kind of jive with the definition for health, athletic, or recreation facility. So we just want to make sure that we're allowing for that kind of facility as we are moving forward with the planning phases for Creekside Crossing Marketplace.
Just to be clear, the only B6 district currently in the city is the area around IKEA and the hotel.
So Creekside Crossing Marketplace is that area that we're talking about.
So not that we couldn't have another B6 somewhere in the city. Destiny took us there, but
it is the only place that is zoned B6, and there are very restrictive criteria for any parcel that would be allowed to be rezoned B6. So if there are any concerns for this type of use to be elsewhere, the B6 district is pretty much limited to properties that are along the interstate.
How do you want to do this, Carrie? You just want to take all the questions in Article 3, or you want to go through everything and come back?
Let's do article by article. I think that'll be easiest, and it'll
so,
probably
too.
be the best way to just kind of go through this, because some of these are probably not going to garner all that much discussion, honestly. The next two items are animal training and therapy, and a separate category for animal daycare and recreation. Again, two categories for uses that are not unfamiliar to the city, but were not clear in the zoning code as allowed uses. So we want to ask the Plan Commission's consideration for each of these to be allowed as conditional uses in the B4, LM1, and M1 districts. Also want to add to the kennel boarding facility the category of shelter. We currently don't have anything that would allow for anybody to have an animal shelter, but if that were to ever be approved in or asked for in the future, we would recommend them to be the same conditional uses in B4 and M1, but then just adding a conditional use category for the LM1 district.
So, just to be clear, if it became an animal shelter, LM1 district, they would still need a conditional use permit, or would they be free to go?
No, they would be conditional in the B4, LM1, and M1 district. We're just adding the LM1 as a possibility.
But we'd still have to take it up here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, those would be conditional uses. The next category that we are asking the Plan Commission to consider adding is a drinking establishment, and this is your catch-all for your bar, pub, tavern, and those kinds of uses. Not necessarily a restaurant, not necessarily a bar and grill, but just a drinking establishment. So a wine bar or your regular tavern. We did not have a separate category just for this, so we wanted to make sure that we were incorporating that, because not every place is going to serve food. And if they have a limited menu, we're not necessarily going to consider that a restaurant per se. If a majority of the sales is really just for alcohol. Those uses would be considered conditional in Drexeltown Square, the B4 district, and the B6 district. Now, we are going to put a little caveat here about conditional uses in the Drexeltown Square zoning district. because we are aware that there are covenants in place, but if there are any opportunity for something to arise where those covenants could be amended, or if another consideration could be made, we want to make sure that we're not eliminating the possibility in the zoning code for that to happen. Another category that we're asking the Plan Commission to consider is just kind of almost a clarification that auto body and automotive mechanical repair would be considered conditional uses in the B4, B6, LM1, and M1 districts. Right now, the category is just auto body repair. We want to make sure that mechanical repair is also included in there. Two new categories, electric vehicle charging stations and equipment sales and rental, would round out the vehicle-related uses that we're asking for Plan Commission consideration. Electric vehicle charging stations, we're not really necessarily talking about an ancillary use. So the Meyer proposal, for instance, where there are 2 electric vehicle charging stations, may be permitted. But if this is just Meyer, and Meyer wanted to put in their own charging stations, that would be something that would be allowed as well, but it wouldn't need a separate review. So we want to make sure that we're being very clear that any vehicle charging stations are allowed in the city, regardless of what the development is. If it's just a vehicle charging station on an empty lot, that would have to comply with all the other portions of code, meaning there would have to be site and building plan review and things like that, but we want to make sure that we're allowing for those uses. Under equipment sales and rental, we want to provide some ability for those types of uses in the A1, LM1, and M1 districts as conditional use permits.
Just definition of equipment, are we talking lift rentals, trailer rentals, things of that nature, car rental? Car is really not equipment, it would be vehicle.
If we can, there is a definition that's proposed in Article 10 for equipment sales and rental, which would be the use of any building or portion thereof, or other premises or portion thereof, for the display, sale, rental, or lease of new or used commercial, industrial, or agricultural equipment, including but not limited to cranes, tractors, bulldozers, graders, excavators, and other heavy equipment or machinery as an ancillary use of a zoning lot, and any warranty repair work and other repair service conducted as an accessory use.
Thank you.
Two new uses that we're proposing under industrial would be contractors' shops and offices as one use and a contractor's yard as a separate use. And the reason that we wanted to separate those two is because the yard may often come later than the shop or office, both of which we are considering conditional under the M1 district only. And obviously contractors' yards with that would have outdoor storage would also be held to the standards of the outdoor storage section of code.
Question, Carrie?
Yes.
With a contractor shop office, would LM1 also be appropriate to have a conditional use if you don't need the yard? I guess what I'm saying is, if you're a contractor that necessarily doesn't need the yard, say upholstery cleaning, something like that, where it's really just a van and an office.
We could put that under conditional, but the only item that I could foresee as being possibly problematic is when you say that you allow it there, but then you say whenever they come back later and want a contractor's yard, no, I'm sorry, you can't have that. Now, that's not to say that they wouldn't be told up front, because they certainly would. But if the Plan Commission wants to consider that as allowed in the LM1 district, we can certainly put that as a conditional use.
I would think it'd be worth looking at. I just say that because you think of contractors, particularly myself, I think of construction. But it's not to say that you don't have cleaning service, something along those lines of service that way, where you don't necessarily have a yard, but you just really need to store business equipment away from a residential home and have a separate office space.
So the definition of contractor's shop and office is an establishment used for the indoor repair, maintenance, or storage of a contractor's vehicles, equipment, or materials and may include the contractor's business office. Does not include outdoor storage. Okay, the last category that we are asking for Plan Commission consideration to add would be truck and trailer parking under accessory uses as conditional in the LM1 and M1 districts and as temporary uses in those same districts under the temporary use. Want to clarify there when truck and trailer parking would be allowed. Okay. And the last item that we want to...
Hang on.
Yes.
Sorry. Can you just repeat that one more time?
Sure.
Make sure I got a good handle on it, because we got a lot of truck issues.
So we want to say that truck and trailer parking would be allowed under an accessory use category, meaning it would not be the primary use of the property. Truck and trailer parking would be conditional in the LM1 and M1 districts
On their property.
on the property that is associated with
Okay.
another allowed use. As temporary, under the temporary use category, they would be only allowed in the LM1 and M1 districts. Again, temporary use has the requirements and the criteria elsewhere in the code with regard to how long, where, and the other requirements that go along with that. So anything that would require a long-term temporary use would have to come before the Plan Commission. Anything 14 days or less could be issued a temporary use permit administratively. Okay. The last item that we want to ask for Plan Commission consideration in Article 3 is under accessory uses, accessory structure, clarifying that they are permitted in all districts. We missed that one before. Any other questions on the proposal for Article 3?
Just in general question, on Article 3, where the list you just went through, we're adding specific businesses that could be asked for conditional use. So I remember not too long ago we had like a funeral home come through, crematorium. Is that something that's going to be added, or am I in the wrong article?
We believe that that was already covered in another category that's allowed in the.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
thought that we were saying that we didn't have any language for that, but you kind of lumped it in with something else. You would know better than me, Carrie, actually.
I think we were satisfied with where we put it before.
Okay, that's it.
If it turns out to be something that we need to clarify in the future, we can certainly come back. I want to clarify also that these amendments are kind of a cleanup as a step one. These were some of the items that we have, as we've been using the code for the last 6 months or so, noticing just some things that we missed and some things that made sense to us to include. A little bit of a cleanup, a little bit of a clarification. By no means is this fixing everything. And there will necessarily be other things that we bring before the commission for consideration. So I just want to make that caveat. Any other questions on Article 3? Okay, proceeding to Article 4. These are some more specific use standards that we wanted to clarify in here. So under Section 170402, under agricultural use standards, we don't actually allow anywhere in the city for slaughterhouses and animal processing facilities. We wanted to clarify that anywhere that has an agricultural use, we cannot prohibit, small scale kinds of animal slaughter and processing. I cringe whenever I say that, sorry. But what this is prohibiting is the commercial use of those particular facilities. And just clarifying that, because it's nowhere in the code where it's allowed, but this is basically hammering home. If anybody were to be, one of those facilities that does large scale slaughter and processing, that's just straight out not allowed.
Okay. Not so much slaughterhouse, animal processing. Does that include, like butcher shops that yearly take in the gun deer, at hunting season, they process game animals? do there. Because we do have some businesses that provide that service.
I also have some farmers that are in our city limits that are thinking of raising, like, the chickens, and then that has to be, federally mandated and checked, so would that make it a commercial?
No, if they're federal regulation does not necessarily make it commercial, okay? But the processing for
Game animal.
deer and game animals, I would have to look into that. I would have to look into what kind of clarification or distinction we can make for that.
I think we should just maybe take a little bit of a look at that, and I'm probably way off on this. Animal processing is far different than somebody, let's say a sausage manufacturer, beef sticks and what have you. That's not considered animal processing.
Well, we do, we have waste meat.
But is that animal processing or is that food manufacturing?
Without having an actual definition at my disposal right now.
Let's clarify that because.
Well, yes, I will clarify that and I will bring that back, but the intent, in my opinion, for animal processing facilities are those large scale, which are both slaughter and animal processing. Or, the, not wholesale, but the, large quantities of just carcasses that are brought in for processing by cutting or grinding or, all of that typically goes along with those kinds of facilities. I don't think the intent was, or it didn't even cross my mind, the small scale kind of game. And it certainly isn't trying to get at agricultural operations. It's a hard one, and I'll have to clarify that. But we want to make sure that we have the prohibition on slaughterhouses at least. And I don't think your comments are on mic.
Oh, I don't always like to just put a flat out no out there, but I've watched with a lot of interest on local slaughterhouses that have had other troubles in cities, things like that. So just want to make sure we're not knee-jerk reacting to some of the issues going on elsewhere.
Understood. We've never actually allowed slaughterhouses in the city, at least large-scale commercial ones. And we've never had, we've had some allowance for animal processing facilities, but it's been kind of, under the previous zoning code, there have been this kind of animal processing, the hide processing, this kind of, it was spelled out more.
So, not that it's a slaughterhouse, but animal processing facility, would that be a fish farm?
No. I think we tried to, I think when you're talking about fish farm, I think we were putting that under aquaculture.
Okay.
I think so. I think
okay,
we were trying to anticipate that.
I know I'm getting deep and I don't want to take
That's
up
okay.
the whole night, but I think these are things we should really look at because that's a pretty broad stroke.
Understood. And having a definition would certainly help in clarifying what a slaughterhouse is, what an animal processing facility is, and what those categories would pertain to. So with the Plan Commission's blessing, I would like to keep in slaughterhouse with the understanding that we will have a definition for presentation to the council if you want to, move forward with this. And I will bring back animal processing facility.
Okay. And
I'm good with that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Throughout Article 4, we noticed that there was a little bit of a inconsistency in verbiage, where principal and primary building were used interchangeably. We wanted to have consistency, so principal is typically the language that planners use. We changed everything that was primary to principal. It's not going to change any of the content, it's just changing the word. In terms of content, however, the next section would be a couple of sections having to do with residential buildings and allowing vinyl siding, and that would be for consideration for the Plan Commission to include vinyl siding for multifamily dwellings, for multifamily complexes, single-family attached, and single-family detached. So those are the 4 sections that are cited, and this is something that the Plan Commission would need to direct staff as to whether or not you want to allow that. You don't have to allow it in all sections. You don't have to allow it for all buildings. If you think it's more appropriate for one or more, then that would be something that staff would be asking for your input on.
So a quick question. So does this mean that the entire property can be vinyl sided?
So the way that it's wording under multifamily building for that first section, under sub 7, which says exterior building materials shall be traditional time and weather tested materials and techniques. Under B, exterior building materials utilized on upper floors may include all materials permitted on the ground floor as well as vinyl siding, which is being presented for consideration, EIFS, stone veneer systems, or precast panels with inlaid or stamped brick texture. All materials utilized on upper floors shall have a minimum thickness of 1 inch and shall be structurally integrated into the facade of the building. That same language is also for multifamily complex. Since those two are tied together, we should probably just focus on whether or not the Plan Commission is satisfied with that particular language for multifamily buildings and multifamily complexes.
So the way I interpreted that is if you have it on the ground floor, you can have it on all levels.
That's not correct.
Okay.
Exterior building materials utilized on the ground floor shall be limited to wood, masonry, stucco, fiber cement, or stone veneer systems. It's the upper floors that would be allowed to have vinyl siding. But the upper floors do not have to have vinyl siding. What it's saying is anything that you use on the ground floor, you can also use on the upper floor, including vinyl siding, EIFS, etc.
Okay. Yeah, because I interpreted that you can use vinyl siding in both,
No.
even though you have the paragraph before not stating vinyl siding.
No, no.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we did run into that with a multifamily. Yes, I don't know, I'm not sure who's really using the vinyl anymore.
We do have a proposal that is proposing vinyl siding for, it's only a single story. But it's in a multifamily / single family attached type configuration.
Thoughts? I've seen it used.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, so it's still, it cannot be used on the ground floor, but can be used on the second floor?
That is correct.
Okay, I just want to be absolutely sure. Would this change some current proposals, such as down by Buena Vista? Are they going to start changing up all their designs?
Nope. Anything down at Lakeshore Commons is governed by an existing PUD.
This affects everything going
I don't really have an opinion, but I think some people have strong opinions about it, I guess. It's kind of where I'm
forward.
gonna
They
land.
really do, and I mean, if you talk siding these days, with party board plank, you name it, everybody's going to tell you different things. Steel siding versus satin. It's really going to be a preference and choice. share with staff with it. Obviously, they're okay because they wrote this up.
Staff is only presenting it for Plan Commission consideration. Staff has no opinion.
Well, what spurred you to put it in there?
Proposal.
Okay.
And it's not that we're for or against. It's literally just a matter of, is the Plan Commission looking at this in terms of wanting to have vinyl?
No,
We are going to have applications that present vinyl in some portion on multifamily residential buildings. It's just going to happen.
I really strive for consistency, and it really stinks when they come in here and one proposal makes it work and look nice, and another one not so much, and then you got to pick and choose based on your opinions and choice. To be fair to all the developers, we should try to building materials. So, whether we limit upper and lower as presented, or we just rule in or out the product.
There is one more caveat that staff would like Plan Commission consideration. As currently written, you could also have all upper floors of a multifamily, multi-story building as EFS. And that's a departure from what was allowed under the previous code. Under the previous code, EFS was allowed as a maximum as an accent material of 25% of the facade. And that would not be the case with this language.
That one worries me a little bit. Look.
I don't think your comments are being picked up. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Again, that one worries me a little bit. Quality of product, installation, the look. I don't want to judge anybody's product per se, but it's a pretty big departure when you think about the size of some of our complexes.
What would we do with proposals? Was it a percentage that they could have a percentage of vinyl on a second floor or a?
Under the previous zoning code, they didn't have a percentage for vinyl.
Have a accent or
I take
something
that
like
back.
that?
Actually, I take that back. I believe for multifamily residential buildings under the previous zoning code, they were required to have a minimum of 65% of the visible perimeter of any facade, or 65% of every facade. Brick, masonry, and I think maybe glass. There was some language in there. Vinyl was not allowed for multifamily. Vinyl was allowed for single family and for duplexes, but not for multifamily. Now, there was a consideration, there was language built into the code that said the Plan Commission can modify that percentage, and you ultimately have the approval authority for what gets, for what buildings are approved in what configuration, what materials, what percentages. But there was that 65% rule. Now, of course, we did see proposals that didn't meet the 65% rule that were approved by Plan Commission based on, allowances for other materials to be used, fiber cement, for example. And fiber cement was often used in place of the masonry. So it wasn't necessarily that the vinyl was being utilized. It was more like allowing a different kind of siding. But what I'm getting at, or what I'm hearing, is that there is a concern for having both without a percentage limitation.
I kind of think so. Could have some pretty big walls there that are just.
Be all EFS, could be all siding.
Yeah.
I've quickly formed an opinion. So we've kept that out of there for a reason, and for have one proposal to come in, and I have a hunch it's money driven. We know materials are up, and could this possibly be something 5 years from now we look back and with all these proposals coming and go, boy, we're a little short sighted. We wanted to let people come in and build because of material costs, and now Now it's nothing but siding, second floor, third floor siding, vinyl siding, and nobody's happy with it. So, if you wanna, if everyone can think back, and that was before me, why it was left out in the first place, I'm guessing because of an image Oak Creek wanted a certain standard. So why would we lower our standards now and stick that in there, I guess, is what we have to ask ourselves.
In some cases, the products weren't there when the code was written,
That's
such
that's
as
a good
fiber
point.
cement. things
Sure.
of that
Fiber
nature.
cement, thin brick, thin stone, none of those materials were allowed under the previous zoning code, although there were constantly, I take that back, not constantly. There were often considerations that were made for utilizing something that wasn't a modular, something that wasn't a standard. Keep in mind that under the old code, we also required that there was a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission to use cultured stone, which is basically just formed cement to look like stone. There were material standards that were presented in 2008, and that's what we were going on. But that didn't foresee, like the mayor said, fiber cement products, which are ubiquitous now. I don't necessarily think that allowing vinyl siding or EIFS as entire walls are probably the way that we want to go. If we want to limit those to a certain percentage, that might be something that we would have to bring back to the Plan Commission. We could go with 25%, but is it 25% of just EIFS, or is it 25% of EIFS and vinyl?
I would think that, we see that vinyl siding is not the vinyl siding of 10 years ago, like on people's houses, right? They've been using it as decorative. It could be in 5 years, it could be, look like a whole different product.
Well, the other consideration is we are presenting vinyl siding and EIFS in all residential buildings, multifamily, single-family attached, and single-family detached. Is that something that we want to allow? Is there a distinction between your single-family product and your multifamily product? And if so, what is that distinction?
Thinking about who came in a couple meetings ago, it was I can't remember if it was condos, and they had the vinyl, I believe it was the vinyl cedar. It looked terrible. I think you might be opening it up to that, where it's vinyl, and because you got like limitless designs when it comes to vinyl. It's all just stamped, making it look like cedar shake, or making it, and it can really some pretty ugly stuff.
It could be,
flying
but fiber
through.
cement does the same thing too. Just to provide a counterpoint. I'm not saying,
Right.
both are valid. Absolutely.
You know,
I absolutely believe that.
We're killing a lot of time here trying to engineer this. I think that one needs a little further.
Okay, so at this time, we are not going to recommend vinyl siding to be incorporated into those materials for any residential building.
Sure.
EIFS is already in there, though.
And leave it as is.
Okay.
When you,
So,
my apologies, Mayor. Please
oh no,
continue.
go ahead, Chas.
So when you say it's already in there, what does that mean for all types of buildings?
That means that you can use EIFS on the upper floors. And you can also use EIFS for upper floors of single-family detached and single-family attached.
Per our code.
Per code currently,
And so currently, is there a percentage?
no.
We don't run into that often.
There are some multifamily, I'm sorry, not multifamily. There have actually been, surprisingly, some single-family dwellings that have been proposed to be all EIFS. This would only allow it on the upper floors, which could be interesting.
Yeah, my question would be, should we treat this like the vinyl? Have the same focus area?
Well, again, EIFS is currently allowed in the code, so you'd be asking for that to be stricken.
Thoughts?
Because what I heard is EIFS can be on any level if it's 5 stories.
It
or
could be on
story
the upper
two-
stories.
2 through 5.
Right. but we don't allow 5-story residential buildings
Okay, so 2-story?
except for in one district.
Maybe, what's the largest, 3-story?
Typically, the maximum height is 50 feet.
That 3-story?
3, maybe 4.
Okay, so,
Probably 3 or,
so the second and
more often.
third floors could be all ephes and not the ground floor?
Yep. Yep.
I guess I'm confused. If EFS is already in there, why is it highlighted and why are we talking about it?
Because I brought it up for the Plan Commission's consideration. I thought it was interesting that we allowed EFS, and if we're going to be allowing vinyl siding, I thought it was treated the same. We're not adding it, it's already there, but it's something that, since we had a materials percentage limitation previously, I wanted to draw the Plan Commission's attention to it. We don't have to make the decision tonight. If you just would rather move on and just not allow vinyl.
We'll move on because we're not getting a consensus.
All
When do, Carrie, I know this probably ain't in here, but shipping containers, when do we allow them and is that steel siding?
Of your shipping containers.
Temporary uses, Mr. Mayor, they are allowed as temporary uses.
To be building materials. Okay, moving on. That was just some, like,
That was a dig.
move us ahead. Gotta give it.
Shipping container. Get off the ground.
So the next section that we are adding is just a clarification of requirements for trash receptacles and their screening standards in mobile home parks, because that was something that wasn't actually clear. And I did note that while I am presenting it in one section of the mobile and manufactured home park standards, that same language may need to appear in another section because there's some for platted and some for non-platted, and I don't think I necessarily included it in both. Essentially, it's saying receptacles shall be located within a designated area or areas, interior to the park, outside of all travelways and easements, and shall not be located in any street yard setbacks, and they shall be screened per code.
That's self-explanatory. No one's gonna argue there.
The next section is clarifying accessory building allowances and standards. This might have a little bit of discussion, so bear with me. So under section 17040414, these are accessory buildings, and what we are trying to do here is clarify residential versus non-residential accessory buildings, and then in the next section, residential versus non-residential accessory structures, because there have been some inconsistent applications out there that led staff to believe that we really do need to kind of clarify, because holding a commercial or a manufacturing facility to the same as a residential standard for an accessory building or an accessory structure just doesn't seem to make logical sense. So the language here says 2 accessory buildings shall be allowed, not permitted, but allowed per lot, and shall only be permitted after a principal structure has been constructed on the same lot. We needed to add that language for clarity, because there have been some questions, multiple questions that have come up as to whether or not an accessory structure could be placed prior to a principal structure. It was clear under the previous zoning code that you could not do that, just adding that clarification back in here. And then under A2, on residential lots less than or equal to, et cetera, same for sub 3, on residential lots greater than half an acre, et cetera, et cetera. Those standards are not changing. We're just adding the clarity that these are for residential properties. On non-residential lots under subsection 4, accessory buildings that do not exceed 250 square feet shall not require Plan Commission review prior to permitting. That's just trying to give a little bit of leniency to those small-scale commercial or industrial structures like sheds, rather than kind of making everybody go to the Plan Commission and pay $850 for something that would be less than that. Kind of giving them a little bit of a, throwing them a bone. Under subsection 10, Basically calling out the exterior building materials that would be allowed for non-residential mixed use or multifamily. Proposals to use alternative exterior building materials may be submitted as an administrative adjustment request per code, only for accessory buildings that do not exceed 250 square feet. Any question with those proposals? Okay. Moving on to the accessory structure, again, clarifying that 2 accessory structures shall be allowed per lot only after a permitted principal structure has been constructed. Accessory structures shall not exceed 100 square feet on residential lots and shall not exceed 200 square feet on non-residential lots, adding in the non-residential portion. Subsection 4, this is also getting at a little bit of an interesting situation where there have been a lot of pergolas requested this year, both residential and non-residential. And some of those pergola dimensions are causing some confusion. Do you go with the footprint of the holes, because these don't have floors, or do you go with the the overhang of the roof and the how much real estate that takes up? Because there could be an overhang that's up to a foot. So what do you go with? Well, I was being lenient and saying the footprint underneath where the poles kind of define the square footage. That's what I was going by, not the roof. That was giving people a little extra, but sometimes the dimensions for those prefab things just don't really match up. So in this case, what we are suggesting is that in lieu of 2, you could have 1 that does not exceed what you would have had with 2. So you're essentially saying, I only want 1, but I want them to be, instead of 100 square, instead of having 2 structures that are 100 square foot each, I want 1 that's 200 square feet. You are waiving your right to have another accessory structure. You're not adding any more square footage than you would have been allowed anyway. It's just under 1 structure as opposed to 2.
Going back to 2, just very quickly. Accessory structure cannot exceed 100 square foot.
Right.
But can a shed be built?
That's a building, an accessory building. So these are getting at gazebos, pergolas, those open air structures.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
Made clear.
And the same accessory structure in lieu of kind of waiver is under 5 for non-residential. Any questions or concerns with those? Okay. The
deck and accessory structure.
Oh.
That's different.
That's different.
But if you put a pergola on top of deck,
The pergola would then be in a structure. We have had that question.
yeah, I know, and then you put the gazebo back there.
Right. Under subsection 7, under the same accessory structure, basically saying accessory structure shall require a permit, the certificate of zoning compliance pursuant to section 17, et cetera, et cetera. What we've been saying is if you apply for a building permit and our department signs off, you don't need a separate certificate per se. We haven't created one yet, and we don't feel that you need to have a separate fee for that, so it's all just rolled into your building permit at this point. Lastly, in Article 4, we received some updated information from our city sanitarian that the language that we had incorporated there was a little bit outdated, I guess. So this is clarifying that A copy of the food truck license and written proof of the last inspection has to be submitted to the satisfaction of the environmental health specialist, sanitarian. And if an inspection is actually required, then a fee shall be provided and be required. Prior to this, it was basically saying that they needed to go and get a separate permit with a separate fee from the city sanitarian, and he said that's not the way it actually works. That only happens if they don't actually have a license and a current inspection. So this is just clarifying based on his input. Any questions on Article 4? Okay. Moving on to Article 5. This is really easy for the first one under Section 170503A. We are only clarifying that single-family driveway standards under this section apply to both attached and detached. Any questions there? Okay. Section 170507 is a complete update for the fences. A lot of this is clarifying language in order to make it a little bit easier for folks to interpret. Some of it was just, things that they were stated, but they weren't necessarily stated the same way and for, consistency. Under A1, the approved materials, the intent from the discussions under the complete update was that chain link would only be allowed if it was vinyl coated. What made it into the code was coated. And the question came up as to whether or not anodized meant coated. And we said, no, that wasn't the intent. So we're just clarifying that we do mean vinyl coated chain link fence. Okay. Under 2 materials, we added the word only in the final sentence, which says permitted fence materials in exterior side yards shall only be materials which are designed and intended for use in fence installations and shall be limited to A through H. Under A for vegetation, we are adding an example, which is a hedgerow. That's to be consistent with what was listed under 1. Same with adding D, which is stone or brick, which seems to have been missed. No other changes until we get to subsection 5. At the end of subsection 5, we are adding a sentence that says landscape plans shall be submitted with a fence permit application. Doesn't have to be fancy, just has to have something on paper. Subsection 6 for side and rear yard fences. Fences are permitted upon the issuance of a permit in the side and rear yards of lots in single-family residential districts, subject to the following requirements, and this is where everything changes, except for the graphic, which we don't have changed here. 6A, fences shall not exceed a height of 6 feet. Fences shall not extend into the front yard. Fences shall meet the requirements, and there's a typo there, for street-facing yards in section 5 above. No fence shall be located closer than 2 feet to any alley right-of-way line. Fences may be allowed within other city easements, as determined by the city engineer in subsection B below. Subsection B is all about easements. Previously, if you wanted to have a fence in an easement, you weren't allowed. Just blanket prohibition. This is allowing a little bit of leniency and specifying under what conditions a fence in an easement could be allowed. Fences are prohibited in any access easement. This includes combination easements. So if you want to put a fence along your driveway and that's in an easement, sorry, that's not going to happen. Fences are prohibited in sanitary sewer and water main easements. This includes combination easements. If there is any infrastructure in the ground, you are not allowed to place a structure on top of it, period. Fences are prohibited in stormwater easements. This includes combination easements. Again, any infrastructure, you are not allowed to put anything on top of it. Under 4 is where we allow some leniency. The city engineer on a case-by-case basis may approve the location of a fence and other easements owned or controlled by the city that are not prohibited in the previous sections above, if no public infrastructure is located or planned within the easement or the location of the proposed fence. Upon verification from a submitted grading plan that grades within the easement shall not be altered and shall conform to the approved grading plan. When a fence permit application includes the conditions of approval signed by the landowner acknowledging all labor and costs associated with the fence installation or replacement within the easement are borne by and the responsibility of the landowner. Approval of the fence does not include approval for other flow impeding obstructions, including wood piles, raised gardens, berms, etc. within the easement. Landowner remains subject to all conditions of the easement, including removal of the fence at the landowner's expense. Any other conditions placed on the specific permit as required by the city engineer. And finally, it is the landowner's responsibility to obtain authorization to install or replace a fence in an easement that is not owned or controlled by the city. This may include, but not be limited to, utility easements, such as gas and electric, private stormwater easements, private drainage easements, private landscaping or planting easements, and similar.
No, I mean, this is really, so when you say all these changes, so this is basically changes from when the code was adopted 6 months ago. I mean, this is more how, like, the engineering department was dealing with fence permits pre-code update. So there's a conditions and restrictions that go through if they're asking for easement in these locations that are highlighted, on that the second half of page 40.
Okay.
So we're kind of going back to what happened
Little
last year
bit.
and previous years, essentially.
Giving a little bit of leniency, but kind of clarifying where those, instead of requiring the city engineer to make a determination as to whether or not an easement qualified, this was basically saying, nope, city engineer doesn't even have to look at these because there's just a blanket prohibition. But in these other instances where it might be a little bit questionable, yep, city engineer can make the determination.
It adds a lot more definition.
Any concerns or questions with that section? That is probably the biggest change in all of this. Nope. Okay.
Carry on.
All righty. Last part of Article 5. Table 170501 or 170511. For concrete specifically, for interior side and rear, what we were doing is allowing the Plan Commission to make a 3/4 determination approval if 100% of those particular facades could be concrete. And that is the only change to that section. Any questions? Okay.
I do have a question. So, per our regulation, for lack of a better term, I thought we had certain codes in place where an interior side or a side of a building could not be 100% concrete. It
And
had to
that's-
be broken up by maybe windows or something else. So I guess I'm not understanding these two items.
So it would be at the Plan Commission's discretion, which is why there's a 3/4 majority approval requirement here, whether or not an interior or a rear could have 100% concrete. It's also stating that they don't have to find an alternate material when it's a concrete tip-up wall. And we're saying you have to have brick or fiber cement or some other material on the side, interior side and rear, to break up that particular material. It doesn't necessarily mean that the plan commission is going to approve of a blank wall, because that's actually still prohibited.
Oh, okay.
But outside of windows, which actually glass is not included in the materials calculations anyway, it's excluded. If the plan commission wanted to have an approval for a concrete tip-up wall, that would still have recesses, projections, windows, painting, whatever you need, that allows you to do it with a 3/4 majority approval. In the current language, it says textured, any percentage is allowed, but non-textured was limited to a maximum of 50%. This just allows the plan commission to make the final determination. We don't often see textured walls for concrete tip-up walls.
I guess I'm still unclear of this 100%. Can you go through it once again for me?
So, for instance, if you are in a manufacturing zoning district and you want to utilize a concrete tip-up wall, let's just forget all of the other articulation requirements and glazing for now. If you just want to put up a concrete tip-up wall that's painted, this allows the plan commission to say, yes, you can do that. Otherwise, they would have to break that up, and they would only be allowed to use half of the facade as concrete. So they would have to somehow figure out how to integrate brick, stone, fiber cement, what have you, on an interior or a rear. Keep in mind, most rears of manufacturing are loading docks. So that doesn't really make much logical sense there. This allows the plan commission to approve basically up to 100% on this interior side and the rear.
I guess I'm still unclear. Why would we want to do that?
You have in the past.
You have, so if
100%
if you have a particular situation in an industrial park where it's backing up to the woods or something like that, and it's a wall that general public's never gonna see, you can do something on that order.
For instance, if we have a manufacturing lot next to a manufacturing lot, and that common lot line, they want to have concrete facing each other, this would allow the plan commission to say, yes, that can all be 100% concrete.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions in Article 5? Okay. Article 6. Hopefully this is a little bit quick. Clarifying that ground-mounted signs are allowed in Drexel Town Square and B2 as permitted. Those were just missed. Those are temporary signs, by the way, requiring a permit. Okay. The next 4 sections we put together because it's removing the exact same thing. We did not intend for there to be a 10-foot setback for easements. We just want them to be outside of easements. That's all that's doing. And then finally, we are clarifying a typo. Imagine that, a typo. The maximum allowed size of a wall-mounted banner sign, 60 square feet. We had 60 and 30 there because they were copy-pasted. Any other questions for Article 6? All right. Oop. Article 7, we are adding 170709 for the traditional neighborhood development T&D standards under the PUD standards. That was something that we had requested to be put in, and unfortunately, we didn't realize that it was missed in the final document that was presented for consideration. So it's not changing anything from the previous code. All of the standards are exactly the same. I didn't get to format it for you. The charts are not formatted in the same as the rest of the code, and the code sections haven't been updated, but the text is all exactly the same. Any questions there? Okay, we're almost there, I promise. This is it. I did have a couple of other definitions that didn't make it into your packets that came later because somebody pointed out to me that we were missing some. So, Under accessory building, we are saying that general farm buildings are excluded from the definition of an accessory building because otherwise they are not really farm buildings that would be useful because they'd be limited to a certain square footage, and that doesn't really make sense now, does it? That was my error. Under animal boarding facility, we're saying see kennel because we have a definition for that. Definition for animal daycare and recreation is added, a definition for animal shelter, and a definition for animal training and therapy have been added. Under bank, we say see financial institution because we were missing the definition for a bank, and we are missing the definition for a financial institution, which we now have. We are adding a definition for certified survey map because it's not entirely clear to people what a certified survey map is if you have never done one before. The certified survey map language that we are incorporating here is somewhat of an amalgam. So let me know if this makes sense to anybody. A survey prepared in accordance with Section 236.34 of the Wisconsin Statutes and Municipal Code by a licensed Wisconsin land surveyor that is a division of land other than a subdivision as defined in those statutes. Certified survey maps shall be required for any division or redivision of land that does not include more than 8 parcels or outlots within properties that are zoned for commercial, industrial, or mixed-use development, or not more than 4 parcels or outlots within properties otherwise zoned. Is that clear enough to everybody?
Questions, comments?
All right, moving on. Community-based residential facility. There were some errors there, so this is literally copying and pasting from the statute. I am not going to read it. Added a definition for contractor's shop and office, which again does not include outdoor storage, and then a contractor's yard, which does. That is it for A through C. Any questions on A through C? Okay, added the definition for a drinking establishment, which is an establishment licensed under Chapter 125 of the Wisconsin Statutes, in which the primary use is for the sale and consumption of fermented malt beverages or intoxicating liquors upon said premises, but does not include a full restaurant. That does not prohibit bar food, but it just is not a full restaurant. And if anybody has any way of making that a little bit clearer, I am open to discussion. Under the E section, we added a definition for electric vehicle charging station and equipment sales and rental, which I previously read. Under the definitions for F, a family entertainment center or FEC is considered an indoor facility that provides attractions, games, rides, and other entertainment options marketed toward families and patrons of all ages, may include restaurant or food services. See also indoor amusement park and fun center. Okay, definition of a financial institution is any institution engaged in the business of providing financial services to customers who maintain a credit deposit trust or other financial account or relationship with the institution, including but not limited to banks, savings and loans associations, building and loan associations, credit unions, lending and mortgage establishments. Well, you should have these, but financial institution is probably one that was actually added because somebody pointed out that we didn't have a definition under there. It said C bank and we didn't have bank. I will make these available too as well. So if you have any concerns about what these are in between now and when we present to Common Council, I can certainly incorporate that language. Defining financial institution was a bit of a hassle, by the way. Under Fun Center, it says C Family Entertainment Center, which is just a holdover. I had general retail highlighted in green here, and I probably should have mentioned this under Article 3. Is it clear enough to the Plan Commission that general retail also includes general commercial, or should we add a slash as was presented in the chart, in the allowed uses table? We don't have to. I just didn't know if anybody was concerned that if we just say retail, it wouldn't incorporate anything other than retail. even though it's general commercial. Okay.
There.
Okay. General service, just adding, general service may include but not be limited to hair salons, barbers, spas, dry cleaners, laundromats, tailors, and clothing alteration and repair establishments, cobblers, travel agencies, real estate agencies, and similar, because there was a question. All right, nothing until we get to I. Indoor amusement park is C Family Entertainment Center. Nothing in L. When we get to M, manufacturing heavy has a clause here, but excluding concrete crushing and animal slaughter or processing, and we are going to take out processing for now. All right. Under light manufacturing, there is one sentence added to the end that says excludes basic industrial and animal processing, custom manufacturing, and concrete crushing. I believe we still want to prohibit those in the light manufacturing district. All right.
That everything?
Hang in there, just checking. Done.
You're gonna pass out to us?
New.
One quick question, because my packet stopped at M. So would the slaughterhouses and processing be defined in the S section?
It hasn't been defined yet.
Oh,
So,
it hasn't? Oh,
yeah,
okay, okay.
it has
I
not been
couldn't
defined
check,
yet. Yep.
Because we don't have that.
We don't have it. So anything that you had in your packets was anything that, at the time of the report, was drafted.
Okay.
The only things that I added were basically the couple of that you were like, where are these? The bank, the financial institution, those were added later. They were missing.
This was just a review. You don't need action. Or
Yeah,
do you need action?
they do.
You do need action. Do we want to exclude bullets point 3 and 4, where we weren't sure about the vinyl siding, EFS, and animal processing?
Suggested motion is be amended as proposed, but you can clarify
Points 3 and 4 to be reviewed further.
we are removing animal processing facility from section 170402A7 and any discussion of vinyl siding in section 170403 B7B, C9B, D2B, and E1B.
Okay.
I did not write any of that down, so I won't.
All right, guess I'll do the motion. Okay. Bukevich will move that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that Articles 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 10, Chapter 17 of the Zoning and Sign Ordinance of the Municipal Code be amended as proposed after a public hearing, excluding for further review.
Animal processing facilities under section 170402A7 and vinyl siding on residential buildings in section 170403B7B, C9B, D2B, and E1B.
As stated.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with Dawn.
Grillo, aye.
Shinsky, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
All right, thanks for hanging in there, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, just a couple announcements. Thank you to staff, big time. It's a lot of work doing these amendments, keeping track of this stuff, and it's really important stuff too. So I can't thank them enough on top of everything else we ask them to do development-wise. And for those of you that have been here for a while, I was just talking to somebody about the Plan Commission, and we've been busy for a steady 10 years here. It's pretty amazing how much work actually goes on at this, so kudos to you. Thank the staff, thank Carrie. For those of you that don't know, Kevin, our IT guy, this is going to be his last planning meeting with us. Kevin's going to be moving on, and congratulations to him. He has a great opportunity. Really hate to lose him. You know, you guys get to see him every couple of weeks here, but he is a dynamo. He's really vital. IT is very vital to what the city does, and he is very good at it and has really moved us forward and prepared us for the next stage here. We'll be in fine hands. His staff is great, but want to wish Kevin all the best going forward. We will miss you, though.
Good luck, Kevin.
Then farmer's market. Dawn, we're getting to the nitty gritty here.
We are 4 more weeks.
Yep. So produce is all coming in, pumpkins, all that stuff that represents the fall season. So get out there. More importantly, that market goes from 9 to 1. So get out there early. But if you decide to come later in the market, stick around. We have our event called Cafe. It's our annual cultural event. That's culture, art, food, and entertainment. We have a host of different cultures represented. We're going to have vendors there as well. Some of the farmers market vendors will stick around as well. There's going to be dance groups, demonstrations, some speaking. It's really going to be a nice event. The weather's supposed to be fine. So really come on out and join us. If you haven't been there, check it out. So with that, we'll look to adjourn.
Carrillo moves to adjourn at 8:14.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with Dawn.
Carrillo, aye.
Shinsky, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski.
Oldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
All right. Night, everybody.